Lysa, I'm going to get started. Thank you for your time. Every time I read one of your books, and I am a fan, so I just want to just be just upright, honest about that. I'm probably your biggest fan. My wife would say that she is, Lysa. I've been going through the Bible day by day here, and I've been doing it with this new devotional called The Eyewitness Visual Experience. And I'm going to send you a copy of this, Lysa, just because it's fired me up. So I think of how you fire me up in Peter. So this morning, before our time together, I was reading the story of Peter here in Acts chapter 2. And what I love about this story is that it puts everything in first person. So there's biblical characters like that, Lysa, and it says this: for me, there's no greater thrill than being powered by God to love people. That's exactly what makes being a Jesus follower so exciting. So when I'm with you, by video, Lysa, here, and I've heard countless of your messages. When I'm reading your stuff, I get fired up. How do you stay so fired up, Lysa? Is that a fair question to ask? I normally don't ask that, but I raised my number one question after reading Peter here and went straight to that one. How do you stay so fired up?
Well, thank you. That's a kind question. And I'll be honest, I don't always stay so fired up. Sometimes I get the fire of aggravation and resentment and bitterness and just like being done with some people, because it's complicated when there are feelings involved. But I have learned that our feelings must be indicators, not dictators.
Wow.
In other words, our feelings need to indicate that something needs to be addressed or worked on or tended to, but our feelings should never dictate how we act and react. And so I don't do this perfectly, but what I do know is that there is a gift to every bit of brokenness that has ever come into our life. And the gift is the more we are in tune with the hardships and the hurts that we have faced, we can have compassion on other people. And it is compassion that really fires me up and helps me remember. Compassion means calm passion. It means to suffer with. And one of the greatest ways we can ever look like Jesus is when we decide that our part of suffering with someone else is to not retaliate in the hurt that they have given us. And when somebody hurts you, it causes you suffering. But what if you lifted up that suffering to the Lord and said, Lord, this is one of the few times that I look so much like you, and I'm going to offer this up as a sacrifice of praise. I'm willing to suffer with this person and not retaliate, so that I can be a stronger witness for you, and I can do what you said for me to do: love God and love people.
Lysa, I don't want to give away too much of the book because I feel like it is like a movie, to be honest with you. And I've already read it, so my friends are like, can I see a copy? And I'm like, you got to wait till November. Sorry. But what I love about the title, it immediately described my attention: forgiving what you can't. I'm like showing you this like you don't know what your title is. Sorry, Lysa. Forgiving what you can't forget. Where did the title come from, Lysa? And better yet, where did the strength come from to write this?
Oh, well, I texted a friend yesterday that reached out and said, can I please get an early copy of your book? And she's like, I need this message. And I've seen some people got advanced copies, and I'm kind of upset I didn't. So.
Oh, sorry, Lysa. Yeah. I'll send you one.
But I told her, I said, this message simultaneously felt like it might kill me and save me all at the same time. Because, when you talk about forgiveness, you are touching on some of the places in people's heart that they have been wounded the most deeply, hurt the most greatly. And so, when you ask me like, what gave you the courage to write this book, or what even propelled you to write this book, I'm telling you, this message found me because I needed it. So when I started to write this message, I knew that God was needing to tend to my heart, because I actually wanted a message like this on forgiveness to read, but I couldn't find it. And I discovered that there are so many misunderstandings around what biblical forgiveness really is and what it is not. So the title actually came from a big misunderstanding. When I would do focus groups for people, a lot of times they would say, the reason I can't forgive is because I can't forget. And you know, the Bible says forgive and forget. And I'm like, no, the Bible actually does not say that.
Right.
The Bible tells us that God will remember our sins no more, and that he has the ability to throw them to the depths of the seas to be remembered no more. But it never says that people have to forget in order to forgive. And honestly, if you look at the whole reality, when we are hurt can go in one of two directions.
Yeah.
Hurt sitting inside the human heart untended to will have such a propensity to turn into hate. And that's the direction that we start going in when we do the devil's work for him.
Wow.
When we start perpetuating more hurt and more hate and more hurt and more hate, and people that are living saturated with their own hurt, they are so epically offended by everything. And I think we see a lot of that right now in our country and just in the human dynamic. But the other direction it can go is that the hurt that's healed can turn into expanded capacity for compassion with other people. And I'm not saying that we should allow people to hurt us or abuse us. And I'm not saying that we don't need to have boundaries. We do. But what we don't need to allow is that hurt to turn those boundaries into barriers that shuts down the human relationship. And we also have to remember that there's a gift in remembering some of the ways that we've been hurt. The gift is that if we give that to the Lord and we allow that hurt to be healed, then we can be a conduit through our testimony of giving other people hope. You know, we take the compassion that we have received and the comfort that we have received from God, and we give it to other people. So in Revelation, I think it's in chapter 12, verses 10 and 11, where it says, the enemy is defeated by the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony. Yeah. You see, we don't want to forget what we've been through, because there's a great testimony that can be devil defeating when other people are going through these situations. Here's the secret though. If you want to know if you've really been healed from a hurt that you have experienced, listen to the way that you tell the story. And if we are more focused on the details of how we were hurt and presenting proof of how bad that other person is, we are not healed. When we trade that proof for perspective and start telling the story, not focus so much on how bad the other person was or the details of how we were hurt, but rather we start focusing on the life lessons. We acknowledge what we've been through, but the focus is the life lessons that we've learned as a result. That's how we know that we have traded our proof for perspective, that we are healing. And that testimony will be powerful because it will help other people, and it will give them hope when they walk through something just as hard as us.
Lysa, you spent a lot of time studying on forgiveness, like literally, like I want to say somewhere I saw 1,000 different ways. I wrote down in my notes here, I thought it was so interesting, Lysa, where you spent 1,000 hours of studying forgiveness. I know it's going to sound like a dumb question, Lysa, because, you know, what you learned is all in the book, obviously, but what did you learn personally the first 2 hours of the 1,000 hours?
Okay, that is not a dumb question. So I rebuke the enemy that tried to tell you that was a dumb question.
Okay, good.
That's actually a great question. Here's what I learned in those early hours of studying, that I had a lot of resistance toward forgiveness.
Wow.
And I was aggravated and annoyed that God would give us this command for which I could find no exception. You see, in the early hours of studying forgiveness, when I opened up the Bible, I was looking for, where is the exception?
Right.
Like, God says to forgive, but certainly there are exceptions to this rule. And so I was aggravated that I couldn't find exceptions. And forgiveness by God is a command by God. And then you start looking at other parts of it, like reconciliation and forgiveness don't hold hands always.
Wow.
So while forgiveness is a command by God, reconciliation is very dependent on, is it safe? Is it reasonable? Are both people willing to do the hard work to come back together? And so I started to recognize, even though forgiveness is a major cornerstone of the Christian faith, I really did not understand what the Bible actually said about forgiveness and what the Bible actually did not say about forgiveness. But first I had to attend to my resistance. And the reason I felt resistant is because when I was a little girl, when my mom taught me about forgiveness, it usually happened in a dynamic where I would hurt my sister, and then my sister would start crying, and my mom, the great judge, would appear.
Right.
And mom would say, Lysa, you were wrong for hitting your sister. Say you're sorry. And I would say, sorry. And then my sister she would look at her and she would say, now Lysa says she's sorry, and I'm going to instruct Lysa not to hurt you again. So you are safe enough to say that you forgive your sister. So she would say, I forgive you. And then my mom would say, the two of you hug and make up. And if you don't stop acting foolish, I'm really going to give you something to cry about. Okay. And she would walk away. And that was a good lesson for my mom to teach us. However, I never let that little girl understanding of forgiveness grow up and mature and be biblically grounded in my heart in a understanding of the word. And because of that, I took a very little girl understanding of forgiveness into some very adult situations.
Yeah.
And so what was feeding my resistance is I kept waiting for the great judge to appear to declare me right and this other person wrong. I kept waiting for the other person to say they were sorry. I kept thinking, I have to know how this situation is going to turn out before I forgive. I kept thinking, I'm not even done hurting yet, so I can't possibly forgive. And I kept thinking, if I forgive this person too quickly, then the hurt they caused me, if they don't learn their lesson from this, they're going to go out and hurt other people.
Right.
Right?
Yes.
And so, there were just so many reasons, because I did not understand what forgiveness really is. You see, I thought forgiveness was me gathering up enough spiritual maturity or determination to just override my feelings and just do this, like, I forgive you, just to be obedient to God. But forgiveness is not made possible by my determination.
Wow.
Forgiveness is only made possible by my cooperation with what God is doing. You see, as God's forgiveness flows to us, we must let it flow through us. We cooperate with what God is already doing. So forgiveness is not made possible by my determination. It's by my cooperation with God. And God says vengeance is his. God doesn't say the other person doesn't need to learn lessons, that God doesn't say that the other person won't be confronted by their sin or won't even be punished because of what they did. But God says, place that part of it in my hands, because only God can address it with this other person in equal measures of mercy and justice. And so God says, trust me, you don't want to take retaliation because you'll never be able to teach them the lessons they really need to learn. Only God can do that in this kind of dynamic. So we place our hurt in God's hands and we cooperate with his process. And as I let God's forgiveness flow to me, if I refuse to let it flow through me, that is the heavy weight of unforgiveness that weighs so many people down.
Yeah.
And prevents us from living the abundant life in Christ that we should live. So we've got to let this forgiveness flow go to us and through us. And here's the main thing I'll say, because I want to be so sensitive. I know that there are some people listening here who have been hurt deeply. And without knowing my story, you may think that I'm just teaching this on a surface level. But the past 5 years of my life, I have been wounded in deep, horrific ways betrayed and rejected by the person I love the very most in this world, my husband. And, you know, our story is not a neat, tidy story of like, I discovered he was being unfaithful and then he immediately repented. No, it was 2.5 years of extreme uncertainty, of us living apart, of him at times telling me he did not want to be married to me, and feeling rejected and wounded and hurt over and over and over. The story got so dark and so hard. But in the middle of that, God met me before I knew how the story was going to turn out, before Art ever said he was sorry. God met me when he was still with another person. And God said, now's the time to forgive. And it seemed so confusing until I understood that it is time for us to stop suffering because of what other people have done to us.
Wow.
And the only way to sever the suffering is through the power of forgiveness.
Wow.
So there you
That's
have
a
it.
lot, Lysa. I was going to ask you about your husband, but you answered that question for me already. So thank you, by the way. It turns out in the most, I don't want to give away too much of the story here, but I want people to read the book, but it turns out in a very incredible way. And I would tell everyone to go on YouTube and watch this ceremony between you and your husband. It made my wife and I, more so her than me, Lysa, tear up like crazy, because it was one of those things where we have been praying for you and read your work and heard your work for several years. So we feel like we've been a part of the story too, Lysa. Sorry.
Thank you so much. That's a gift, such a gift.
So it's been such a gift. Last question, Lysa. Did you say everything you wanted to say in the book? Like when you hit send to Thomas Nelson, did you go, wow, I said everything?
Okay, that is such a good question because I thought I had.
Huh.
And then one day I was in an editing session with my team. And when you write a book, you know, it's a much longer process than what people know. So I turned the book in a year ago, and it's taken us a year to edit it and get the book ready for publication. So when I turned the book in, then you start getting emails from your editor of things that need to be fixed about the book. So one day my editor sent a note and said, hey, in this chapter, we need a little bit more of this. And so I said, well, you know what? I was asking, my team said, do you want to write this? And I said, I think I've already written something like that, but I put it in a file in my computer of just words that I didn't think were good enough to be in the book. So I opened it up. That file of words that I had not included in the book was 30,000 words. So my team just about had a heart attack, and they said, give us that file. So they started going through the file, and they were like, Lysa, you cannot cut all of this. So we told the publisher, we fixed the original problem in the manuscript. I gave them words for that, but we had so many extra words. I'm gonna show you something. I wrote a whole nother book. I don't know if you can see it.
Wow.
But it's called The Forgiveness Journal. It's going to come out at the same time. And I want you to see, it is all those words that got cut from the original manuscript, plus beautiful pictures of my family. There's me and my boys. You can see that. You can see pictures of my house. You can see the places where I wept with the Lord, where I processed. And so it's like having a friend that will walk through this journey with you. And then there's lots of spaces to journal. You can see like all these places that you can process what you're learning in the book. So
I can't wait.
These are the extra words. So see, look how good your questions were. You didn't even know.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. It's been a joy. Tell your wife I said hi.
I will. Have a good one, Lysa. Enjoy.
Thank you. Bye-bye.